And hello, fabulous AP students. This is your favorite teacher, Mr. Jacobson. I'm excited to be with you today. Well, we're here. We're at the Civil War. We've talked about all those things that have led up to it, like sectionalism, past wars like the Mexican Wars and the Mexican Cession and the annexation of Texas and the Compromise of 1850 and so many other things. It's been an unavoidable thing, um, and now we're here. So let us begin. All right, so this will be the costliest American war in terms of human life. About 750,000 deaths are going to occur. We're going to have the aftermath will have over 4 million, well, around 4 million slaves that'll be free, and that will give what Lincoln calls the new birth of freedom in the country. American society was transformed due to increases in industrialization, modernization in the North, and this will eventually cripple the South. And then you will have what some historians call as the Civil War as the Second American Revolution because of the changes that occur afterwards in the country. So, looking at some military differences here, right? So, the Confederacy, it just has to it had to only fight a defensive war. So it doesn't have to necessarily conquer the North. It just has to make sure the North doesn't conquer them till the North kind of get, tired and just sue for peace kind of thing and say, fine, you can break away and have independence. They're not going to have to move their troops as much as the North will, since the North will largely be the ones trying to invade and force them to enter, to concede and come back to the Union. It's going to have a long indented coastline, and that's going to make it difficult to blockade for the North. We're going to see some pretty experienced military leaders, and the troops will have a high morale, at least towards the beginning. Now, in the North, they're going to have to conquer the South, which is a pretty big piece of land, about the size of Western Europe. We're going to have greater population in the North. You have 22 million against 5.5 million in the South. Population advantage was aided by 800,000 immigrants that the North received. Um, Afterwards, we're going to have the Emancipation Proclamation, which is going to add another 180,000 of African Americans to join the Union Army, and the U.S. Navy gave the North command over the rivers and the territorial waters. So there are some definite advantages to the North. Economic differences that we'll see. So Confederates will hope that European demand for cotton, remember the South is known as King Cotton, that's going to lead people in Western Europe, especially like Britain and France, to sort of recognize um, the South, the Confederacy, the Confederate of the United States, and provide financial aid. So, like most rebellion movements, the Confederates are gonna bank on having help from outside. Now, the North, we're gonna see a lot of. Well, just understand the North has so many advantages, but economically, because the North's all heavily industrialized. You got modernization happening. They're controlling most of the banking capital of the country. The North was in control of 85% of the factories, 70% of the railroads, and 65% of the farmland. Skills of the northern clerks and bookkeepers proved valuable in logistical support of the military operations. And we're going to see a lot of struggling for independence politically. So strong states' rights are going to prove to be a liability. Remember, the South is all about strong states' rights, right? And so that's not going to go away once there's a Confederate, And so there's going to be some uh, tug of war between this new Confederate government, federal government, and states. And that's not going to it's not going to, they're not always going to see eye to eye. So the South is going to just hope that if they could just wait out this war, that eventually the North will weary out. The North will vote Lincoln out, and there could be some super peace. And so anyway, so the Confederacy just feels like they have to wait out the war until the North gets tired of it. The North actually has to, they got to win. They're trying to preserve a nation. So interesting, right? So in the Confederate States of America, you have a new president. His name is Jefferson Davis, and he's going to seek to increase his executive powers, but that's going to mean less rights for the states, which they're going to resist. So many states, I shouldn't say many, but states in the South will withhold troops and even supplies because their state comes first, even above the federal government of the Confederacy. So Confederates will have a constitution. It will be similar to the U.S. Constitution. However, it will limit Congress's power to levy protective tariff and appropriate funds of internal improvements. So the Constitution will also prohibit foreign slave trade. Now, Vice President Alexander H. Stephens, he's not going to see eye to eye with Jefferson Davis all the time, and he's even going to kind of support and encourage the defense of state rights, and will even urge Georgia to sort of succeed in response to a despotic action of the Confederate government. So Confederacy was constantly short on money during the war, and the government had limited powers to exact taxes from the states. And the government issued $1 billion in paper money. However, that's going to lead to severe inflation. So um, the federal government, the Confederacy, is going to have some problems. Now, the war is going to begin. Okay, you're going to have Washington, D.C. be the capital of the North. You're going to have Richmond, Virginia will be the capital of the South. And they're not too far apart from each other, also, which is interesting. Anyway, so the first general in chief will be Winfield Scott, and he is going to be a longtime veteran. At this time, he's very old, but he was, a decorated war hero of 1812 and even the Mexican Wars. He's going to devise a three-part strategy for winning for winning the war. So he's going to blockade the southern ports along the coastline, and he's going to call that the Anaconda Plan. He's also going to take control of the Mississippi River, or at least he wants to take control of the Mississippi River, which will divide the Confederacy in two. Because if you take that, and then you'll have Louisiana and Texas kind of cut off from the rest of the South and other parts as well, that the South were trying to encourage to become slave states. And then he's going to raise and train an army of 500,000 strong to conquer Richmond. Now, the first two were easier to achieve than the last one. And we're going to find that, especially when it comes to the Battle of Bull Run. So, we're going to see this first Battle of Bull Run. 30,000 Union troops are going to march south from Washington, D.C. to Richland, Virginia. And that's going to lead to the Battle of Bull Run at Manassas Junction in Virginia. As the North closes in on victory, the Confederate general, Thomas Stonewall Jackson, he's going to counterattack, and that's going to send the experienced Union soldiers retreating back to Washington, D.C. So the first attempt to sort of invade Virginia will ultimately fail. Lincoln's going to put in a new general known as George B. McClellan. And George B. McClellan's going to say, well, I need a lot of time to, prepare my troops and to train them the right way. So he takes like months to do this, to the point where Lincoln's losing patience. He's like, all right, dude, you need to start attacking, okay? You've had enough time to train. And he always seemed to have some kind of an excuse or whatever, but since Lincoln, pretty much said, no, you're going to go attack now, figure out a plan, um, he's going to attack. And the brilliant General Robert E. Lee of the South is going to repel McClellan's invasion, and he will retreat once again back to Washington. So then McClellan's going to be put out of office here by Lincoln, and he's going to put in General John Pope. So John Pope's going to go down, and he's going to fight, and there'll be a second battle at Bull Run, which he will lose and have to retreat again. So the first part of the war is not looking good for the North, and the South is looking increasingly better. Now, Antietam is a pivotal moment in this Civil War. So, with Pope's defeat, Lincoln is going to reinstate McClellan as a Union commander once again. Now, McClellan has an advantage here because for some reason, as a stroke of luck, if you will, okay, McClellan had the plans, Lee's plans, of his next attack, and Lee was planning on attacking in the north. And the plans came because a copy of it had been dropped accidentally by a Confederate officer. So now McClellan has the actual military plans of his attack from Lee's plans of attack. And so this helps the Union Army to intercept Lee at Antietam Creek in Maryland, in the Maryland town of Sharpsburg. Now, this will become the bloodiest single day battle of the war, where you have more than 22,000 soldiers will be killed or wounded. Now, Lee will be unable to break through the lines because they knew his attacks. So Lee is going to have to retreat back to Virginia. Now, McClellan didn't pursue him, and this is really going to upset Lincoln because Lincoln was like, dude, you had an ace in your pocket, you had his battle plans, and he started retreating. Why didn't you follow after him and start crushing him? And McClellan always aided on caution, which really just frustrated Lincoln. Anyway, that's the last time you're going to see McClellan as a Union general because Lincoln is done with him. He basically said, "You missed a rare opportunity. We could have ended this war." And anyway, so the Battle of Antietam is pretty significant because the Confederates did not win. They failed to get what they so urgently needed, which was recognition and aid from Great Britain and France. Had they won, Lee could have proved that he could win a battle in the North close to the capital of Washington, right? But because that wasn't the case, they're going to not get that recognition or that financial aid from Great Britain and France. This partial triumph gave Lincoln the encouragement to issue um, the Emancipation Proclamation further down the line. Now, Fredericksburg becomes another major battle here. So um, they're going to oust McClellan and bring in Ambrose Burnside. So this guy is like the opposite of McClellan. He's reckless, okay? McClellan was overly cautious. Burnside is reckless, if you will. And you're gonna have this battle um, in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and there's gonna be immense losses. More so on the north than the south. You have 12,000 dead and wounded compared to 5,000 Confederate casualties. So uh, that's not going to make Lincoln happy either, because that's a lot of people dying compared to the South. Okay, over double. So both Union and Confederate generals were slow to learn that improved weaponry, because you have all this advanced technology, right? You got all this industrialization happen, modernization, new technologies coming out, better ways to kill and mutilate the body. So it used to be where, you had this moment of blazing glory where you would just rush the enemy, and if you could overpower them, all the better. But it was just harder to do that with all these new technologies, new advancements in guns, um, especially if they're in entrenched positions. So by the end of 1862, the awful magnitude of war was all too clear, with no prospect for victory on either side. Now, a few battles were happening in the water. There was, due to the Anaconda Plan, which was to try to, barricade, there was a South ship known as the Merrimac, and the Merrimac had iron sides, or ironclad, if you will. Okay, so what that was it was a ship that had metal plates, and it was going around and it was sinking a lot of the northern ships and making it harder to secure the barricade. That's going to lead to the north sending their ironclad ships, and there's going to be a famous fight between the two, the Monitor versus the Merrimac. The Monitor was um, the Norse ironclad ship, and you're going to see this battle, and eventually it's going to end in a draw, but it's going to also become a turning point in the war because now they've decided, you know what, we can't use wooden ships with these iron ships. They're just, you can't sink these iron ships with wood ships as easily, and the wood ships are too vulnerable. So they're gonna now go to ironclad ships. Now you have Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, and he's going to be this general from West Point, and he's going to just have where the generals of the East were not winning victories. Grant was the opposite. He was winning victory after victory after victory. He's going to secure the Mississippi River eventually, starting with the Cumberland River, which is a branch of the Mississippi. He's going to keep having victories all the way down. Um, and he's going to start like in Shiloh, Tennessee, and just keep going down to the point where it's going to make it easier for a famous battle to happen by David Farragut. And David Farragut is a general who's going to he may not be a general, but he's a commander that's going to take New Orleans from the south, which is going to put almost all of the Mississippi River into northern hands. Now, there's some federal affairs happening. So there's the Trent Affair. So there are a few Confederate diplomats, James Mason and John Slidell, and they're going to be on a ship going to Great Britain because they're going to try to get that recognition of their government and get them to support them and finance them, etc. The U.S. is going to find them. They're going to basically stop the British ship, remove them, and bring them back to America as prisoners of war. Now, this is really going to piss off the British, and they're going to say, you better, release those diplomats. They weren't fighting. They were diplomats, and you don't do that. And so Lincoln's going to agree and set them free, but that's going to cause tensions. Now, you also have Confederate raiders. So the British did allow Confederates to purchase warships from British shipyards. So the British aren't sending them like official British ships, but the Confederates can go and buy, British ships from merchants that aren't officially part of the British flag, right? The British government. So these are just independent merchants in Britain, and the British government's going to allow them to do that. Now, that's not going to make the North very happy. One of those ships, the Alabama, is going to capture more than 60 vessels, um, of the North before being sunk off the coast of France by the Union warship. After the war, the Great Britain will eventually agree to pay the United States 15.5 million for damages caused by Confederate attacks and ships built by in Britain. So again, South is trying to bank off, we are King Cotton, and um, eventually the people of Western Europe are going to want our cotton, and they're going to want to set us free from this blockade. And they really banked off their clout. Remember, they're the cloudiest when it comes to cotton. However, the foreign nations simply just started changing where they got their cotton. They would start importing more cotton from Egypt and India, and that didn't go so well for the South. So the South kind of got their anticipations of this is how Western Europe will respond once they can't get our cotton anymore. It was not what they had hoped. Now, we have two other factors happening here why Britain didn't recognize the Confederacy as a legitimate government. General Lee's attack at Antietam played a role. Without a decisive victory, the British government didn't feel like they could risk recognition. And then Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in January of 1863. This is going to change things because now the Civil War is going to become a moral issue, and Britain had already denounced and abolished slavery in their country. So again, if Britain is supporting the South, it's obviously not only in favor of slavery but wants to keep spreading it. That doesn't look good on the world stage, right? So a lot of Britain's working class were not in favor of it. So because of the Emancipation Proclamation, Britain just didn't feel like they could join the war because it had now become this moral issue of human rights. So we have a few turning points happening, and this is important. So we got Vicksburg in the west, where this is going to be like the last major battle along the Mississippi River. And once that battle is completed by Grant, who's going to siege the city for like, is it 7? I can't remember, 7 weeks, I think. But anyway, um, that's going to put the Mississippi completely in the hands of the North. So they have control of the Mississippi, and then Gettysburg is a pivotal moment because Lee is going to go on the offensive, and he's going to start going through the Northern Territory. He's going to go into Pennsylvania, and that is going to lead to the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, if Lee could capture the city, in any city in the North, really, a significant victory in the North, then hopefully that could sway the North's opinion of how to proceed, because if Lee is now capturing cities in the North and disrupting those things and causing the North to fear, then they could sue for peace. Um, Gettysburg is the most crucial and bloodiest battle of the war. It happened over a couple of days here, with more than 50,000 casualties. Now, ultimately, Lee failed in his attack, causing him to retreat to Virginia for the final time. Now, Grant is going to be placed in command. Lincoln's going to say, you know what, Grant, you know how to fight, you know how to win battles, you're my guy, and brings him over to the East Coast. So Grant's going to be commander of all the Union armies. Now, Grant's strategy against Lee was to continuously just try to outflank him. Lee is hurt because of the Battle of Gettysburg, and he's going to keep going down and keep trying to outflank him. And the problem is that he would outflank him, but the Lee would lose less men than Grant did in those battles. However, you have to remember there's far more population in the North than in the South. So as Grant kept outflanking him, Grant had the extra manpower to be able to do that, right? So it was an effective strategy because Lee's men were slowly getting whittled down. Now you also have Sherman's march. So Grant realized, look, we have to break the spirit of the South. And to break their spirit, we got to make them hungry and starving and make them want to force their government to stop this war. So William Tecumseh Sherman, he was in Tennessee and he was told by basically to Grant, just start causing havoc all throughout the South. And so William Tecumseh Sherman, this general, is just going to start going from Tennessee to Georgia. He's going to start burning barns, cotton fields, houses, anything that the enemy could use to survive, he's going to destroy. And he's going to go to Atlanta and he's going to attack and he's going to have a victory where they capture Atlanta, Georgia, and that's going to happen just in time for Lincoln's reelection, which really did well for his reelection because there was victories happening. The victory seemed it was within their grasp. So he marched into Savannah by December, and in February of 1865, he set fire to Columbia, which was the capital of South Carolina. So Sherman is causing a lot of havoc, which is really hurting the South and breaking their spirits. So the end of the war is nigh here. So due to Sherman's march of destruction and the blockade of the coastline, the people of the South were starving in the winter of 1864-1865. So Grant is going to continue to outflank Lee, and eventually Lee's armies are going to finally collapse around Petersburg, Virginia. That's going to result in the fall of Richmond, Virginia, which was their capital. Um, the Confederates are going to try to negotiate, but Lincoln's going to say nothing short of the restoration of the Union. Jefferson Davis is going to say nothing short of independence. Of course, he doesn't really have he doesn't have any leverage here, but anyway. Um, so Lee is going to try to retreat west in the western part of Virginia, west of Richmond. Um, and he's gonna take about he's hurting. He's only got about 30,000 men. He's gonna try to escape into some mountains. Grant's gonna cut him off and force him to surrender at Appomattox, Virginia. And here is a picture um, of what it probably looked like at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, on April 9th, 1865. So, out of respect, Grant is going to allow Lee's men to return home um, with their horses. So, again, it just seems that Grant had a lot of respect for Lee, the military leader, the brilliance that he had. Um, yes, he bested him, but he didn't want to in any way embarrass him. And Grant understood as well as Lincoln that we are going to have to rebuild here. And we need to not, basically spike the football, if you will. So the next question is how are we going to rebuild, right? So what are going to be the impacts of Lincoln's policies and laws? Um, what's going to happen when nearly 4 million African Americans, um, what are they going to do as a free people, and what's going to happen to American democracy in general? So, anyway, that's it. Go ahead and write your summary, and we'll discuss this when we return.